Today I want to start a new mini-series, if you will. And I appreciate all the feedback that I get when I do these little series. It seems to resonate with a lot of you. Not every one of you love it, and I get that. But I'm going to do the best I can. But today I want to talk about something, and I'm going to address it a few times, that I think is really prevailing in a lot of people's lives. It's relevant to the betrayed, it's relevant to the unfaithful. It has a lot more relevance to the betrayed, but it still can be an issue in the unfaithful, and that's the issue of bitterness. Now, bitterness is a complex response mechanism, if you will. And you know, you can't always see bitter people, but after they've talked for a little bit, you can hear it. You can feel the effects of it. You never have people that, you know, have writing on their forehead or a name tag that says, "I'm a bitter person, get ready." But you say the wrong thing or ask the right question and oof, it's there. I was bitter for a while. Samantha and I talked through this a lot because when I asked Samantha a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a blog, I said, "Tell me what was the number one thing early on that you really knew you were going to have to war against?" And she said it was going to be bitterness. And I didn't want to be bitter the rest of my life. So, bitterness has to be addressed. The unfaithful can get bitter as well. And all the betrayed spouses said, "Oh yeah, brother." And you wonder, how does the unfaithful get bitter? We'll talk about that. But I borrowed from a lot of different sources. I tried to do a lot of reading. I always do. But bitterness is one of those things that has the ability, I call it an invader. It'll invade everything. It'll invade your marital communication. It'll invade your conflict resolution. It'll invade your parenting. It'll invade your sex life. It'll invade your ability to affect the way you see the world around you. It'll affect your relationship with God, with yourself, with your friends, with your children, with your boss, with your peers. I mean, you name it. Bitterness is an invader. The interesting thing about bitterness is all bitterness starts out as hurt. And if you are talking about infidelity, hurt is like at the top of the chart. I mean, why would you not feel hurt? I mean, if you ask a betrayed spouse, what do you feel more than anything? It's probably going to be hurt. So if you have this incredible off-the-chart sense of hurt, it would be kind of a good assumption to make that you're going to have an off-the-chart ability to be bitter, because the hurt that you are feeling is incredible. If you've been betrayed, and equally true, I think, is the reality that if you have been unfaithful, I promise you, you're going to be tempted to be bitter. It might be throughout recovery. It might be during different seasons. But get ready, because bitterness is going to try to entice you in any way that it can. When I was researching definitions of bitterness, I had, incredible hostility and angst, a feeling of great hate coupled with anger. But listen to a definition I stumbled upon. I was reading on a Psychology Today article, and it said, "A chronic and pervasive state of smoldering resentment." Say that a few times. Man, a chronic and pervasive state of smoldering resentment. That's bitterness. You can hear bitterness a mile away. Now, let me just tell you, I'm not trying to control your response. Do you have a right to be bitter at infidelity if you're a betrayed spouse? Heck yeah, but you can't stay there. Because if you stay there, it's going to steal life from you. It's going to rob you. It's going to do a lot of different things that I'll talk about. Of course you would be tempted to be bitter. But there's a difference between anger, and bitterness. Bitterness is long-standing, it's smoldering resentment. It's not just anger, but it's where anger wants to take you. And if anger can take you to bitterness, I promise you it's going to make everything harder in recovery. Just like I said, empathy makes almost everything better in recovery. Bitterness makes everything harder and worse in recovery. Let me give you some signs of bitterness. When you're bitter, number one, you're going to try and control a lot of things. You're going to try and control your spouse. You'll try and control your spouse's recovery. You'll try and control your kids. You'll try and control everything. I tried that for a long time. I was so bitter, and so I felt like I had to control everything because I was so angry. I had this smoldering resentment towards a lot of different people, even Samantha. And so what flowed out of me was a lot of anger. I told you that story, but also a need to control everything and everybody, and I had to have everything in check and control relationships. When you're bitter, man, you try and control everyone and everything. You struggle with control in a lot of different ways. A second thing that we'll do is we will take on a victim mentality. And when you take on a victim mentality, you start to kind of nurse your victimness. You kind of wallow in it. You support it. And so what happens is you become the victim and everybody else is now the enemy. And so you start to wallow in your victimness. I did that. I was like, well, I know that I blew it, but nobody treated me fairly, and nobody wants to hear what I have to say, and nobody wants to support me, and everybody just thinks I woke up one day and had an affair, and what about Samantha's issues, and people did me wrong, they should be Christians, and they should love me. Yeah, you could see where that was going. It makes me sick to just talk like that for a little while. But that's what we'll do when we're bitter. We make ourselves a victim, but we don't just make ourselves a victim, we stay a victim. So if you're struggling with bitterness, those are a couple of good signs that reveal bitterness inside you. You don't have to be a prisoner to it. You don't have to stay there. But you have to ask yourself, are you struggling with bitterness? I hope that helps you today. Next time, we're going to talk about what bitterness actually does to you and to your recovery.